If some of you have looked at me this morning and I look a little dreary, it is because I am a little dreary. That'd be because I started 9 days ago traveling. Started out in Birmingham, Alabama, at the Birmingham Theological Seminary, teaching a couple days there. And then I ended up in Colorado, where I was speaking there, and we had our annual International Association of Biblical Counselors conference, training centers. We have 32 of those across the U.S. and about 6 internationally that I have the responsibility to train and oversee. So we had meetings with them, executive board meeting, and then our annual conference where people literally from all over the world come to Colorado for us to be able to really just spend a few days together learning again the power of God's Word and the sufficiency of it in our lives. And so I arrived home at 1:30 last night. So started Friday a week ago, 9 days, 1:30 in the morning, landed at 11, got home at 1 or 1:30 and up. And so I'm telling you all that for 2 reasons. If I say something that doesn't sound right, you just have mercy on me for that. But secondly, thank you for those of you who knew I was away and that were praying for me, because that's always essential to the effectiveness of God's work wherever we go. Well, with it being Gideon Sunday, I thought I would do something a little different. If you're visiting, we are studying through the book of Hebrews, chapter by chapter, verse by verse. But we're going to take a break today, and I want to spend our time thinking about God's Word for just a moment. And I think you're going to find what we're going to look at is going to be of great encouragement to you, and also a huge reminder and a challenge to all of us. So what I'd like you to do is to take your Bible and turn to the Psalms, and Psalm 119. Psalm 119 is the largest psalm of the 150 songs. I often think, what would it be like standing to sing all those verses, for sure, because that's what it is. It's a song, and this psalm just goes on and on and on, 176 verses. I mean, some of y'all get tired of 4 verses, right? And this is 176. And you wouldn't want to take this psalm and treat it like a Baptist hymn book and always leave the 3rd verse out, right? You want all the verses of this song because it is incredible. And our time doesn't allow us to spend all the time in this large and massive psalm on the Word of God. But I do want to draw your attention down to verse 9 of Psalm 119. I'm going to read down to verse 19, and I want to draw our attention very specifically to verse 11 that's right there in the midst of this. How can a young man keep his way pure? By keeping it according to your word. With all my heart I have sought you. Do not let me wander from your commandments. Your word I have treasured in my heart, that I may not sin against you. Blessed are you, O Lord. Teach me your statutes. With my lips I have told of all the ordinances of your mouth. I have rejoiced in the way of your testimonies as much as in all riches. I will meditate on your precepts and regard your ways. I shall delight in your statutes. I shall not forget your word. Deal bountifully with your servant, that I may live and keep your word. Open my eyes, that I may behold wonderful things from your law. I am a stranger in the earth. Do not hide your commandments from me. Now I want you to draw your attention back down to verse 11, because that's the one I'm going to spend our time on, because centered around all of this great love and delight for God's word, and this longing that no matter where he roams as a stranger, where he never fits in, that he finds God's commandments as a delight to his soul, is this promise and this great reminder to us in verse 11. Your word I have treasured in my heart, that I may not sin against you. Now I want to say something to you, church. As I read that passage and I thought about it and was reflecting upon it this week in light of our day today, I was reminded again that there is nothing more important, and I really want you to hear that, nothing more important that I can think of than treasuring God's word. There is nothing that will help us be the man or the woman, the husband or the wife, the son, the daughter, the grandparent that God calls you to be, and you really want to be, I know, like storing up God's word in your hearts. There is nothing that will help me be the kind of pastor God has called me to be, for you to be a better elder or deacon or a Sunday school teacher, a youth or a children's worker, like planting God's word deep in the soul of your heart. And there is no greater way you can love your spouse, your parents, your neighbor, those you work with, and those who work for you than hiding God's word in your soul. And you say, well, how could you be so sure that there is nothing more valuable? There is nothing that's so going to make me be the man or woman in the ministry God has called me to be like God's word. Why can you say that there is no greater way to show love to a spouse and parents and neighbors and everyone in your life than hiding God's word in your soul? Why can I say that? Here's the reason. Hiding God's word in your heart is what keeps us from sinning. And it is our sin, right? It is our selfishness that messes up all those things, right? It is our sin and our fallenness that's in us that causes us to really not be the kind of husband or wife. The man, the woman, the son, the daughter, the pastor, the elder, the deacon, the Sunday school teacher, the children's worker. It is really that thing called sin in us that hinders us and wars against us to keep us from being what really God calls us to be and we really long to be. And so this is incredible in this verse here, which it says, if your word has been treasured in my heart, it will keep me from sinning against you. In other words, I will be what you want me to be if I'll just treasure your word, if I'll hide it in my heart. Because all of us know, right, it is that thing called sin in us and our love of it at times, and sometimes it's deception of us that keeps messing up all the things that go wrong in our life. And so if it is sin that is always at war in our souls, and we are always battling, and we are always struggling with, and we always say, yep, there it is again. I messed up. I failed. I came short because of sin. If that's what it is, then we ought to listen to what it says here, because if it's going to help us not do that, then we'll be better at all the other things that God calls us to be. Does that make sense? And so this verse is a profound verse. I mean, because think about this. This is one of the things that we as Christians say is part of our spiritual DNA, isn't it? We hate iniquity, we hate sin, and we love righteousness. Right? I mean, before we were believers, it was just the opposite, right? We didn't care anything about righteousness, and we loved our sin and our iniquity. We loved what we wanted for our lives. But when we became a believer, what happens is there is a new creation that has come alive in that soul. The old man has died, a new man has come alive. And that new man is a man who now hates lawlessness. He hates iniquity. He hates the wrong that shows up in his own soul. And he loves and he longs for righteousness. In fact, I think we could say it pretty straight up and clear this way. If someone doesn't know in their soul that love and longing for righteousness and a hatred of the sin and the failure towards God and others, if they don't know that, they're probably not a Christian, right? They're not even a believer. I mean, they might go to church. I mean, they might do all kind of things to help their neighbor and their friends, but if they've never encountered this transforming work of grace that causes them, as a result of conversion, to now love righteousness, to want to please God, and hate the things that are against Him, then I don't think they're a believer. I remember when I became a believer, just like when you became a believer, I mean, before that, I didn't care anything about the things of God. I knew about God. I knew about Jesus. I knew about church. But I never loved it. I never loved those things. What I loved was my drugs. I loved my partying. I loved those relationships that I was getting in and out of. That's what I loved. But when conversion took place, when God, by grace, did just what He did in every one of our lives, revealed to us our lostness, our sin, our separation from God, and the realization that we could do nothing to appease God, to satisfy His just anger against us and our sins, and we put our hands over our mouth, and we shut up arguing about, we're not that bad, God, and we humbled ourselves under His hand, then at that moment He revealed the gospel, He revealed Christ, and He made known the way of salvation. When that happens, something changes in you. Something changes in me. It's a miracle of the gospel to make us new creations. And that DNA that just kind of goes through our system, and you see it all the time, is that you're struggling with sin, you're hating the sin, you're wanting to get rid of that, you just battle it and fight it all the time, because you also, on the other hand, love righteousness, and you want to be what God's called you to be. And so this verse is key to us to understand what it means for us to hide God's word in our hearts so that we might not sin against him, right? And this is amazing what he says here. What I would like to do in this passage here is I would like us to ask 3 questions of verse 11. That's all we're going to do. Look at one verse. One verse, and we're going to ask 3 questions. First question will be this. What is it telling us to do? What should we do? Right? Number 2, where should we do this? Whatever it is we're supposed to do, where should we do this? And third, why should I do this? What should I do? What is it telling me to do? It's telling me to do something. It's telling me where I should do this thing, and it's telling me why I should do it. So let's look at it very carefully. To the first question, what should we do? Well, the text is very clear. We should hide God's word. We should treasure God's word. That's what we should do. We should treasure it. Now, it's important. It's just a reminder to you, but just as it's so important as we come to this verse and it's telling us to hide or treasure God's word, it's important that we understand what it means by your word or God's word, right? Let's be clear when he says that we are to treasure his word. His word is not the subjective impressions that we call a word from God. It is not the subjective thing like, God help me, I want you to guide me. Oh yeah, thank you for talking to me through your word and speaking to me. That's not what he's talking about. He's not talking about the subjective impressions that come when people say God spoke to me and he was guiding me. That's not what he means. Oh, that kind of word, well, I've got that in my heart and I'm holding on to that. That's not what he's talking about. What he's referring to here is the objective, revealed, written word of God. That's what he's referring to. He's talking about this book that you brought with you this morning. He is talking about the Bible. He's not talking about a word from God. He's talking about the word of God. He's talking about what's been revealed, what's been handed down, what's been written, what is objective. And for the people, these psalmists, when they would sing that song, I have treasured your word, here's what they're thinking about, brothers and sisters. They're thinking about the books of Moses, those 5 books, and the law, and the prophets. The law and the prophets. In other words, the Old Testament, that's what they're looking at. They're saying, I have treasured this book, the Old Testament. By extension, going forward into the new covenant and under grace, it refers to the entire Bible, right? Everything from Genesis to Revelation. And so he wants us to be clear here that he's not just talking about you had some fresh reminder, some word that God just brought to your attention. He is saying what we have treasured is this entire book right here. Now, how do I know that? Well, just look at the verses around those verses and notice what he says. He just keeps piling up terms over and over again to show us that he's talking about the written, revealed word of God. Verse 10, do not let me wander from thy, what? Commandments. Oh, so his word is commandments, right? Verse 12, blessed art thou, O Lord, teach me thy statutes. Oh, your word is commandments, your word are statutes. Verse 13, with my lips I have told of all the ordinances of thy mouth. Oh, so the word is not that special thing that God is just talking to me and saying to me. This is his written, revealed, objective word. It's called commandments. It's called statutes. It's called ordinances. And then verse 14, I have rejoiced in the way of thy testimonies. And in verse 15, I will meditate on thy precepts. So he just keeps piling up all these terms around verse 11 so that we understand when he's saying, I have treasured your word, he's talking about the written, revealed scripture to us. Called commandments, called statutes, called ordinances, called testimonies, called precepts, pointing out different things about this written book. And he says, that's what I've done. That's what God is telling me to do. God is telling me to treasure that revealed revelation of his word. So it's not subjective. It's not an impression. It's just what you brought with you this morning. Now, what does he say next about this? He says that this word, your word, I have treasured. That's a very important word here. He is saying here that I have hidden your word. I've treasured it. I've hidden it. Well, what does that mean? Well, it means that, as in their day, when you had a treasure, because you don't have a bank in their day to go put your money in, you hide it. You store it somewhere. You treasure it because it is something so valuable. This written word that you've given me, I have got to put it somewhere because it is of extreme value to me. You want to hear what Job says about the value of the Scripture? I love this. Job 23:12, Job says, I have not departed from the command of his lips. I have treasured the words of his mouth more than my necessary food. Well, that'll convict a bunch of us today, right? Now, here is a man, Job, who has lost everything in his life. He has lost his home, his possessions, and every member of his family except his wife in a matter of just days. His health is gone. His reputation is gone. And what does he long for? God, tell me why you did this to me. Why did you put me through this? That's not Job. Job is saying, what I want more than any food that'll keep me alive is your word. I treasure it. It's that valuable. So I'd have to ask you a question. What should we do? We should treasure this word. We should see it as one of the most valuable, important thing that we have in our lives. More than anything else. So the question is that how you pick up this book, right? Is that how you handle this book? Is that how you think of the Bible? What he's calling us to do is to treasure it, to see it as valuable. More valuable than anything else. Here's the second question I think the text causes us to ask. If we are to treasure it, to see it as the most valuable thing, the most important, necessary thing for our lives, where should we do that kind of treasuring? Where do you treasure it at? Well, the text says, thy word have I hidden in my heart. That's where you treasure it at. It's in your heart. Now, let me just remind you, in the Old Testament, when they heard the word heart, they weren't thinking about this thing here, right? They were thinking about that inner part of their personality, and it has two components that are essential when it comes to the Bible. It has to do with thinking and feeling. Thinking and passions. What you think about, what you long for, what you hunger for, what you just have to have. And so here when he says that we are to hide, we're to treasure this word in our heart, he is saying the Bible should be something in you that you're constantly thinking on and dwelling on, and you should be having aspirations and longings and feelings for it like nothing else. That's the way the Bible uses that word, heart. It means that God's word is to be not outside of us, right, but inside of us. Your word have I hidden in my heart. And this is very important. The psalmist isn't just saying, wow, I so value God's word that I've got a bunch of them laying on the table at the house. He is not saying, I so value the Bible that I've got it on all my devices so I can go get it whenever I need it. What he is saying is, I so treasure God's word that I have stored it somewhere so it'll be kept in the precious place where I'll think about it and I'll feel things about it and I'll love it and I'll long it, and that place is right in my soul. That's what he's saying. It's saying that he's not just thankful for the word out there, the revealed, objective, unchanging, written word, but he's saying, I have taken that word and I have placed it in my soul. And that's the idea. So he's telling us, what is it that we are to do? We're to treasure it. And where are we to treasure it? We are to treasure it in our hearts. I wonder if that describes you this morning as you go through your week. You open up the Bible and you read the Bible and you want to take those truths and so store it in your heart because it is of the greatest value to you. It is more valuable than the appointment you have to get to, right? It is more valuable than the place you got to go or the things you think you need. It is more valuable than anything else. And it's because it is so. I don't want to just leave it out there somewhere. If I need it, I'll go get it. But I got it in here because I'm going to need it all of the time. That's what he's calling him to do. He is telling him, first of all, you should treasure the word and you should treasure it in your heart. Here's the third question. Why should I do that then? Why should I really treasure this word, value it, see it as so precious and the most prized possession of all, more important, as Job says, than anything I might need to sustain me physically, like food? Why should I do that, and why should I store it up in my heart? Well, the third question is answered in that verse, that I might not sin against you. If I am going to be what God you want me to be, which is to progressively, continually become less and less like that selfish sinner that's been redeemed and more like Christ, if I'm going to do that, what I've got to do is treasure this word, hide it in my heart so that I won't sin against you. That's why I should do it. Both of these are crucial, by the way. If you don't treasure this word, value this word, and store it up in your heart, then guess what? You will not have much victory over your battle with sin. Your fight with sin, if these two things, treasuring and storing, are not taking place, will be a constant up and down experience with a lot of self-determination and willpower and a lot of kiss and make-ups with God. Oh, God, I'm so sorry. I promise I won't do that again. Help me to do better. And then you go and you really mean that and you want to do that, but it doesn't get better. Because we don't want to live in this kiss and make up routine with God. We want to make sure that we stop sinning. That's what he says, that I might not do this anymore. And the key to this is really first treasuring and valuing it so that we store it in our heart. Those things are important. I'm not saying there's not a fight against sin, right? I'm not saying there is not self-discipline and determination and the responsibility to take hold of that battle and do all the things that the Scripture exhorts us to do. But the power of God to win against sin is found in the Word when you treasure it and value it and store it up in your soul. If you don't treasure it and value it, all that effort will be in vain. Here's a good way to think of it. I like to think of treasuring and storing up God's Word in our heart is somewhat like an ant who gathers in the summer because he knows winter is coming. And that's what Proverbs 6:8 reminds us of, right? I mean, go to that ant. Look at that ant. What does it do? It knows some difficult days are coming. Challenges are coming when it gets winter. And so I won't wait till winter. And when the hard time is here, I'm going to think wisely now and go store up and put in keeping what I know I'll need in that day. And so for us, we would say that when the dark winter nights of struggling with sin are upon us and the cold winds of temptation are being felt, you'll be glad at that moment that you treasured and you stored up God's Word in your heart, because then you'll have the resource to fight it and deal with it. But if you don't do that, I don't do that, then when winter comes and the winds of temptation start blowing, it's going to be very hard. Impossible, literally, to do that. So I would ask you to think about this as you look back over this week, as you look back over this month, as you look back over this year of your life. Where have you seen growth? Where have you seen changes where sin has been laid aside and righteousness has been embraced and put on in your life? Where your actions and your attitudes have become more like Christ in your relationship with your husband and your wife, your children, and your children to your parents, and in your job. Where do you look back and say, over this last year, I have seen God to change me in those areas? I can tell you this as clearly as I can. If you have seen change, it is directly connected to you treasuring and hiding that word in your heart. Where you haven't seen change is because you haven't done that. Thy word I've hidden in my heart, that I might not sin against you. So let's bring it to the application. Let's wrap it up. If I'm going to treasure it, see it as valuable, and if I'm going to put it in here and hide it in me so it's in me rather than just outside of me that I can go get it when I need it, that brings us, and you all knew I was going to get here, to the issue of memorizing Scripture. You knew we would come there, and this is where many of you right now are going to reason yourselves out of the promise and the blessing of this verse. You're going to say, I cannot do that. I just can't remember. I'm too old. I don't have a good mind. And I'm going to tell you, that is not true. Well, you're old. Yeah, I know you're old. And I know some of you don't have a good mind. I get that. But you can do this. You can do this. Why would God give us this and tell us this and say, oh, that only works if you're a little young, smart person? The psalmist is giving us this reminder here that this is the way all of God's people at all ages and all stages, really one way effectively to not sin is to sow treasure and hide the word in their heart. Now listen, you don't do this just so you can say, so I won't sin. The result is you don't sin because you first and foremost so love this word, and so treasure it. So it is key, if this week you're going to grow, if this month you're going to grow and you're going to change into Christ's likeness more and more and lay aside your selfishness and your sin and all those things that are messed up, it is essential that you really commit yourself to memorizing Scripture. Let me ask you a question. Well, let me just give you a challenge. What if I told every one of you, if between now and next Sunday, 1 week, for every verse you memorize, I will give you $1,000. Hey, I'm going to tell you what, I know what most of you are going to do. You're going to run to John chapter 11:35, Jesus wept, cha-ching, right? $1,000 per verse that I memorize? Listen, if you say, oh man, I would do that, what you just revealed to me is your motive. It's not that you can't do it. It's just you don't have the right motive for it. The right motive is, I so treasure this, I so value this. There is nothing like it. And because of that, I am going to hide it in my heart through memorizing it. Because when I put it in there and store it up in these days, when those days that are hard and those challenges that are before me come, I'm going to be so thankful that in the day of trouble, I found my God. I found His Word, and I turned to it. I love what God says of His Word when we think about it in Psalm 19, verses 10 and 11. They are more desirable. Your Word, He says, is more desirable than gold, yes, than much fine gold, sweeter also than honey and the drippings of the honeycomb. Moreover, by them your servant is warned, and in keeping them there is great reward. That's what God says about His book. That's what God says about His Word. And so a key to memorization, if you're going to hide it in your heart, is your love. It's what you love. It's what you love. It's what you value and what you treasure that will cause you to bury it deep in your soul. When I think about memorization, one of the men that comes to my mind that was such an encouragement to me, and Donald Whitney writes about him in his book on spiritual disciplines. You know, the book that when Donald Whitney was here, I told you I've just ripped all apart studying. Donald Whitney tells the story of Dawson Trotman of the Navigators. Dawson Trotman was a man who was a truck driver. I believe he drove a lumber truck is what he did in Los Angeles. And as he began driving that truck, he committed, because he so loved and valued this book, 1 verse a day. At the end of his first 3 years as a Christian, he had memorized 1,000 verses. He'd stored them up in his heart. 1,000. So I tell you that to say, I'm going to let you off the hook, right? I don't want to ask you to memorize 1,000 verses. I don't have that much money, right? To pay you for every verse you memorize. But what if in 1 week you committed, because you so loved and you so treasured and you so valued this book, you committed to memorizing just 1 verse? That would be 52 verses in a year. And you know what I think that year would look like? 52 weeks of saying, thank God, I'm sinning less and less and less. And I'm becoming more and more like Christ, because the power of God works by His Spirit through this Word to make us that way. So if I treasure it, love it, see it for what it is, and hide it in my heart, there'll be 52 weeks of really what I believe is life-changing things for us. Listen to how Proverbs 22:18 through 19 puts it. It will be pleasant if you keep the words of the wise within you, that they may be ready on your lips, so that your trust may be in the Lord. That's what Scripture does. When it's hidden in your heart, and just in that moment when that winter and that struggle time comes, and the difficulties and the challenges that you're fighting sin in come, it is that moment that those words that you have treasured and they are pleasant to you and you so love and they are in your heart, it's then that you find, I can really trust the Lord. Right? Really, Romans 8:28 is really true. I don't have to just go get the Bible and read it and say, oh yeah, that's what it said over there. But it's hidden in me. All things really are working together for good to those who love God, to those who are the called according to His purpose. It really is working good. It doesn't feel good right now, but it is good. Because God is working a purpose, and that ultimate purpose is to get me past all of my comfortableness in this world and all the things that I think make me happy here and make me more like Christ, which really is for my good. That's what the Word does when we find it hidden in our heart. You see, it all comes down to what you love. Because what you love you will fight for. What you love will cause you to stand up against the greatest challenges and struggles that you might ever find yourself facing. And as I close, I want to tell you what I thought of as I was thinking through this passage again. And I'm not going to show the video clip because it's a little too gross. Mel Gibson in The Patriot. When Mel Gibson in The Patriot had lost a son, and then another son had been taken captive by the British, he rushes ahead of 22 of those British marching along. And he runs and he hides himself behind a tree intentionally because he has something he has to have, and that is his son. He wants his son back. He loves his son, and he wants his son. And so as he hides behind that tree, 22 British come riding through, and he, one by one, kills every one of the enemy. Because of what? Because what he sees is his son. He loves it. He loves him. You see, the battle took on a whole new meaning for Mel Gibson in The Patriot because it was about what he loved, his son. And the battle with sin takes on a whole different look in our lives when we look at what we love, what we cherish, what we just cannot live without. Then you'll go to war. You'll go to battle. You'll fight sin like you've never fought it before. And so as we just briefly on this Gideon Sunday think about the Bible and God's Word and this one tremendous truth from Psalm 119, verse 11, I want to ask you, do you see that? Can you see it right there in the text? That what he is calling you to is to really store up in your heart his Word like you've never stored it before, so that you might fight that very thing that you hate and you want out of you and you want to lay aside. And you're not content to just wait till I go to heaven and it'll all be gone then. But right now, you're wanting to fight it. Well, do you see that the psalmist is telling us that the key to doing that is so treasuring and loving the Bible, valuing it so much that you're just going to store it up, pile it up in your heart so that you can fight that enemy that you so hate. And when you think about the Word of God this morning, I'm going to ask you to do that this week, just to say, I'm going to go out of this place and I'll get one verse a week memorized. I'll just commit myself to memorizing God's Word, hiding it there. And when we think about Gideon Sunday, it's another chance for me, just as a pastor, and you as a congregation, to say, you know what? I really do treasure this Word. It's hidden in my heart. I love this Word. I want it in me so much. But I'm not just thinking about me. I want it in everybody else too. And so I'm willing to invest in those things that are for eternity and to give my money towards those things, because this book, as we already heard, is that means which God brings the gospel to a lost world, and people have come to Christ simply by opening up this book and reading it and hearing the gospel. People who are Christians have found that their struggle and their fight with sin took on a whole new turn when they learned that this Word is what they needed to treasure. So why wouldn't I invest in that? Why wouldn't I give my money towards that? Why wouldn't you do that? Well, if we wouldn't, it would be because maybe, as Ansley reminded us this morning, we're more content with being citizens here than the citizenship above. You see, the citizenship above makes you act different in this world and makes you treat your resources and the things that you love and value in a way you wouldn't have if you were just a normal citizen of this life. So we're going to ask you as we sing in just a moment and we close, and then we have prayer, and the Gideon is going to meet me at the front as I do each Sunday, saying goodbye to you as you leave. He's going to be with me there. He's going to open up his Bible, and we're just going to put money in that book, because it's our way of saying we really are committed to what God's Word is about and what it will do. It's not about how much we give, is it? Right, no. It's just about the heart attitude behind, I really value that. It's a treasure, and I'm going to put my life and my resources for it. And as we go into this week, may God just grant us some real steps of growth, not by self-determination, not by, I'm going to do better, I promise, on my own, but that determination, that commitment to fight, just fueled by a love of God's Word hidden in our hearts. May that be what happens in our lives this week. Let's pray together.